You're listening to Freight Famous, presented by Rose Rocket, bringing you the people that make trucking move. From behind the scenes into the limelight. Here's your host, Justin Bailie.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Freight Famous, a podcast produced by Rose Rocket. New episodes of Freight Famous will be released about twice a month. On this podcast, we talk with guests about how they build, scale, and automate their trucking and transportation businesses. If you have a trucking or transportation business, you might be looking for trucking or transportation software. Or you might know someone who is. If you do, I've got some good news. Rose Rocket has free money to give. That's right, free money. All through our incentivized referral program. To learn more, email us at referralpartners@roserocket.com and a member of our team will be in touch. I am your host, Justin Bailie, co-founder at Rose Rocket. And today I'm super excited to introduce my guest, me. Winnie is going to interview me today for our second annual, do we have a name for this?
Bonus episode. Yeah.
Of me talking about what I learned in business this year, what I learned about transportation, ketamine, blindness, and drug deals.
That's a hook if I've ever heard one.
So listen up because here it comes. Winnie, it is so good to do this. I can't wait to start.
Awesome. Have you told the audience who I am?
Oh, Winnie is the director of marketing, just like she was last year. Have you been promoted since last year?
No.
Winnie's the director of marketing at Rose Rocket.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for having me, JB, as your guest to interview you.
Here, this is one of my favorite shows because, as you mentioned on the elevator up here, you will talk for, you'll get 20 seconds of airtime and I will get 1 hour.
Exactly. I'm your guest, but I'm not here at all.
Correct.
I'm just here to ensure that you get a chance to talk.
Oh, thank you. Well, that is my favorite skill. We were just talking before we went on air here that a woman, Liz, who used to work for us and would help out with the podcast, she used to put powder on me before every show to make sure I looked good on camera. And since she's left, nobody has done that yet. Nobody's stepping up to do it.
I know, the production quality is really, I'm so sorry. I apologize on behalf of our entire team for forgetting to powder you every time you go on air.
I should mention, on that note, we are in a new studio. So this is an extension of our old, no, how do I say this? Winnie, you explain this. I think you're good at this.
This is an extension of our space that we've been able to turn into different podcast spaces. You used to say, like, welcome to the Rose Rocket Studios. Yeah. This is actually the studios now.
Yeah.
Because we have multiple different sets.
Yeah.
It's awesome.
Yeah, it's pretty cool, actually. It's, if you could see it, it's from what you're seeing on the set, you're like, oh, that looks pretty cool and modern and hipstery. But the reality is when you get outside of here, like outside of our little, 10 by 10 booth, like it is like a set. We're in this almost like abandoned warehouse. I feel like you need this would be a place like you need like a code to get into at night, and like if Secret Password would get you up here and they'd play like house music and you drink expensive exotic drinks.
Exactly, and we anticipate a lot more juicier content to come out of a very cool set.
Yeah, I think that's a good possibility. So with that, speaking of juicy content, are we talking about juicy stuff today?
We're going to take this conversation to a few different places.
Okay.
But where I wanted to start was, so last year when we did this bonus episode, it was because you'd been interviewing guests for a whole year and we didn't talk about you, right? We didn't get your story or the founding story of Rose Rocket. So we did bonus episode number 1. And plug here if folks haven't watched that yet. There's a bonus episode number 1 in which JB goes through the founding story of Rose Rocket, and it's an incredible story. Now, a year since that, right, we learned about the founding of Rose Rocket. A lot has happened. We've grown. I would love to talk about and kind of catch people up on your last year.
Yeah, okay.
And so we can start in a few ways, more professionally, and then we'd love to hear about your personal journey as well, because I think that's half of the reason why the guests tune in is to hear you talk and learn more about you. And so how does that sound?
Amazing.
Yeah. You're like, I get to talk.
Yeah. No, it's
about me
with no notes.
With no notes.
And no script.
No script.
So yeah, like let's do this.
Let's do it
right now.
Okay. So we started, well, I'm actually curious. And again, guys, we have no notes, so we're doing this live. what are some trends you've learned about the freight industry from your chair, right? Having interviewed all the guests, having lived the full year as a founder of a tech company in freight, what did you learn?
That's a pretty hard question to start with. So let me try to sound intelligent, which can be tricky. So I think like trends I want to be mindful of because I think that is sometimes like what it simply is a trend. So as I even say it now,
Yeah.
it may not be true, but something that maybe observed, I think,
Yep.
this year, and this is probably broader than just transportation, but probably kind of hits on a bit of startup type stuff too.
Yeah.
Is it felt like it's just as I was watching like Convoy going down was a massive moment this year, right?
Yeah.
Like that is they took $1 billion in cash, as in fun and it didn't work,
Hmm.
and um you
And it scared a lot of people.
it did,
Yeah.
and so I think there's it's so hindsight's 2020, and you can kind of look at the postmortem and say, well, they had done this and they shouldn't have done that, and all you have to do is like go to LinkedIn and look at all the smart people who never took a risk in their life telling you how wrong they were, right?
Yeah.
Like so, like good for you, like jokes on you because those founders and secondaries probably made $100 million each, so they're just fine. But what I would say is like it felt like that was kind of a tipping point in terms of even big companies can fail like that.
Yep.
I think when I personally look at the marketplaces that exist out there, they're broadly like this combination of, and I'm going to use really just like it's almost like a derogatory description for the sake of a good good description.
Sure.
But it's like kind of like it's like dumb freight, dumb capacity. Put it in a blender and see what sticks. And your stick rate is generally pretty low. You're not getting 90%. You're not getting 50% of like loads like matching. So I kind of like looked at that and it just it almost felt
It was a
like
quantity game.
it's a quantity game, and again, it's it's a low quality game as
Yep.
it relates to that, and it feels like in many ways that to me like symbolized what feels like an over rotation of tech, in that we kind of went with an industry. Say when we first started Rose Rocket in like 2016, or I first started in the space in like 2008.
Yep.
There was a little bit of tech, and I would say that definitely the industry was laggard, but
Yep.
it was changing. And I think one of the things with transportation is it's like that cruise ship analogy. It's like it is changing always. But if you're sitting on the front of a cruise ship, I've never been on one, but I imagine this to be the case. If you're sitting on the front of a cruise ship and it's turning, you can't see it turn. It's turning so
Right.
slowly, but it is turning. And I think transportation broadly, that's what it is. It does move, it does change constantly. It's just so big that it can't change rapidly.
Right.
And it felt like there was this insertion of a bunch of sort of like theses and mind share coming at the space saying, this is a massive industry that looks like taxis or looks like, pick your sort of like, your tertiary industry. And they said, let's throw a bunch of tech at this. And it felt like so we went from call it like a 3 out of 10 technical to like a 9 out of 10, what felt like overnight, and total whipsaw effect. And I think we went too far. And I think the industry it wasn't that they weren't ready for it. So I'm gonna say I'll take myself out of this. They weren't ready for it, or they weren't.
And whose we went too far?
I think investors, technology companies, probably even some buyers, obviously, because enough people were buying the technology, but they couldn't get the technology live. They couldn't integrate it into things. Like it was this weird, like it still is, I guess, this mix of like EDI is still, as an example, is still this like predominant form of communicating into systems, which is from the I don't know, the 60s, maybe even older than that, and so that's still like concurrent, and then people are trying to disrupt it with APIs. Now they're trying to go even further. Like there's like all these like multiple stories going on at the same time, and it feels like that there's not this like concise, one step in front of the other.
Right.
So I feel like that the industry has and is kind of going backwards a little bit, but probably for its own health.
Yeah.
And maybe like 7 out of 10 is the right place, just to pick a number. And we went too far. So to me, it's more. This is certainly subjective.
I feel like if I could add to that, it doesn't feel like it's moving backwards, but more the dust is settling.
Yeah,
And
that's
the
a good way to put it.
foundations are getting a little bit more stable
Yeah.
before people move forward
Yeah.
again
Yeah.
with technology.
Yeah.
Right.
And I think there's a risk with things like AI. right?
Mhm.
So I think AI is super in vogue right now. I think the potential is amazing. The applications today are even quite amazing, but there is still a gap between what it can actually practically do at scale
Yeah.
versus, what I think people think this is. We've been through this before. We went
Mhm.
through this with blockchain. We
We
went
can
through
only
this
be
with
disappointed by AI.
100%. Exactly. That's right. It's like, yeah, what is the upright? Exactly. Our expectations are so out of whack. That's a great way to put it. Our
Yeah.
expectations are so out of whack with AI. And so I think that these things will continue to be there. This is technological advancement. This is what it
Yes.
looks like. But I think we've been particularly scorned in this space. I think
Mhm.
with a market that's just it's kind of it's not saying no, it's just not yet.
Mhm. Mhm. I love that, and, this is gonna be an absolute shameless plug, and I wouldn't
Mhm.
be doing my job if I didn't plug it in here
You
as
do
our
like you are the director of marketing.
Yeah, I am our director of marketing. So, part of this step change approach that you reference is exactly why, like, we went out into the world and called the TMS and claimed that the TMS is dead.
Mm-hmm.
Can you share a little bit more on that? And like, I'll jump in and help tell the story together. But that's off of these trends that we saw in which like the capacity for businesses to go reach within themselves and
Yeah.
do open heart surgery on their entire tech stack
Yep. Yep.
was one of the biggest reasons why change is so difficult and so slow.
Yeah.
Right. So do you want to touch on that a little bit? It's like, why do we think the TMS is dead?
Yeah, I think this resonates particularly well with anybody who's been through a TMS implementation, is currently a TMS user today. So I'm going to kind of look at it through that lens because I think this is where this kind of lands in it. We can be somewhat concise in its delivery. The idea that you want a new TMS, I really, if I were to say, that is probably an untrue statement.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to go? Have you done it before? Have you implemented a TMS? Have you tried to implement a TMS? Have you been like, you probably don't want a new TMS.
No.
What you want is a solution to a problem.
Yep.
And so when we proclaim that TMS is dead, what we're really trying to say is we are trying to define value for you. In a way, by selling the TMS, it allows us as a business to shortcut the important conversations.
Mm-hmm.
So we're not inclined to say, well, what are you trying to solve for? What's the actual business problem? What moves the needle? What's a 10x improvement in your business?
Mm-hmm.
If we could do this one thing, maybe this would move the needle.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of saying, here's an entire package of things, 70% of which are not going to apply to you, but we're just going to give you this really broad stroke. And in our defense, in defense of other TMS, providers and builders, technologically, that was really all you could build for a long time. And so the leaning into some of this technological shift, you can now pull these componentries of a TMS apart and sell the things that actually solve the problem versus trying to create more problem, more headache. And you're in this, what feels like, and it's felt like for, thousands of implementations for us, many successful, a lot failed.
Yep.
You go through these processes where it's like, there's something that's just not right about this or working. And I was even actually having a meeting this morning with the enterprise sales team, and it was like this new model, this new I dare say sort of product that we offer into the market. It actually brings with it a much higher dopamine hit because it is a sale that is based on precision versus it feels more like a surgical knife than like a shovel.
Yeah.
Where it was like before, it's just like, here's like, blah, here's everything.
Yep.
And now it's like, what is the problem? What is the pain? Let's solve for that. And it doesn't mean that you can't, from Rose Rocket, acquire a we'll call it, just for, to keep the narrative straight, like a system of record or something that will allow you to run your business. But we're not going to give it to you all at once because we've learned that is just a way to fail. We're going to solve the one of a top 2 business problem that you have first. And then we will build together and work together at rolling it out in the most painless, opportunistic, co-created way possible. And again, I think that's what when we say the TMS is dead, largely it's not just the product is dead, it's the selling motion is dead and not showing value first. That way of selling, period, category like agnostic, is dead. And if you're a company right now that is gating product behind, like, you give me the money and then I'll show you the product. Like, what is it, a fucking drug deal? Like, give the value first.
Even in a drug deal, I feel like you can test out the product first.
Yeah, I guess it depends on the dealer and the situation. If
Uh,
you're buying a large quantity, you probably want to take a little bit to see what it's like. But yeah, I think in the
we
initial
need to
kind
cut
of
this part out.
right,
I'm just
okay,
kidding.
no, you better not. It's like I want people to look it. People
Yeah.
come to this show for education, and if they haven't done a large quantity drug deal, now they know what to do. So the thing that the piece of it here is can you show value first? Can you
Yep.
show value in smaller pieces that allows people to experience not just the product but working with you
Yep.
and all of the things that goes with that. And this it's like the all or nothing approach. I think in software and business in general is going to go extinct.
Yep.
And so we want to be ahead of that, not behind it.
I love it. That's a perfect explanation and the perfect plug I was looking for.
Oh, good.
In explaining that. But yeah, and to reiterate, the way that the TMS was built didn't allow for a quick time to value.
Yeah.
And so like people bought the whole thing because of, again, the way that it's architectured and traditionally built.
Yeah.
And so people don't want to buy that way. They don't want to experience value that way. They don't want to change manage that way. And so the entire framework of what the TMS stood for, we don't believe is the path forward for our industry.
Yeah, and I think it's also so kind of flipping then the narrative to folks who've not had a TMS before.
Mm-hmm.
I think this can actually be a bit of a disorienting conversation.
Because you're trained to want the thing.
What do I want? I need the thing to run the business,
Yeah.
right? So like I need to dispatch the freight. I need to send
Yeah.
a quote. I need to pay the bill. I need to do all the things that in the business. And in some cases, that will be true for you.
Yep.
However, this is the sort of the unpacking of what's available now. And this is one of the really difficult things. It's like, if we'll go back to the AI analogy, it's like, I know, like, hell, I work in a tech company and I'm like, everything I look at now, I'm looking at like, can AI do that? Like, can AI do that? Like everything I look at. And I think there's sort of a similar thing where we have to train our brains a little bit and we have these like very narrow points of view that we work from, right? So it's like, I should buy a TMS because that's what I'm supposed to do because that's what the company that I used to work for did or the company that I aspire to does.
Right.
And moving out of that can be really, really difficult. But I would encourage you to, if you're listening to this, and this I'm kind of moving into plug territory myself here, but like open your mind to problem solving and think about the specific acute problem you have in the business today. And maybe it's multiples. Hell, it probably is. If you're running a business, you have plenty of problems.
Yeah.
But what are the ones that are going to bring the greatest, the sort of the shortest, like so time to value? Thinking about that, and then ROI, thinking about that, and then everything else can kind of roll out. But I think we're trying to take again. I'll go back to just be much more prescriptive, even if you've never been through a TM implementation before. And hey, maybe you don't like our story and you go and buy one. You'll be back because you're going to go through implementing a full TMS.
Yeah, we used to use the description of like trying to rip and replace a TMS is like doing open heart surgery on a business.
Yeah.
Right. And then to add on that technology, to add on that analogy, we're trying to say people are subscribing to open heart surgeries for what could be a different pain in their body.
Yeah.
They're like, I feel pain, and immediately maybe I need to rip and replace my entire heart. Like, that's just not true.
Yeah, and I would say it's open heart surgery in an unsterilized trailer.
Oh my God.
Right? Like it's not like really modern. Like don't think of like some John Hopkins like amazing, like this is like dirty open heart surgery. This is like steak knife. Like you're going to get an infection. Right? Is that too far? But that's, I mean, the drug deal was fine. This is fine.
Great. This
so,
is
yeah,
fine.
Okay,
this
good.
is fine.
All right, cool.
Uncut.
Okay,
Uncut. I
uncut,
love
yeah.
that. Okay, so one of the things that you've learned about the last year, over-index on technology.
General observation.
General observation. I love that.
Yeah.
Is there anything else about the freight industry or the people you've talked to that you found very interesting in the last year that you can trend together?
I mean, again, I think I would take more of like a startup approach. I think just from my learnings from last year, I've been through freight recessions before. So I know, I kind of know what these look like. And I think even sort of a defined sort of economic recession, we're in one or we're not, but we all feel a little bit, I don't know, like, I think we all feel nervous. I think we're all kind of used to it at this moment in time as we sit here and we're like, what is this, end of January?
Nervous for a while.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a long sort of stream of nervousness, I think, in the markets and just our general like psychology around the world and economics. But but every time you go through a recession, it does hit you in a way like you still, it is still oddly human nature to be like, oh my God, this is the worst one. Will never get better again. So we all kind of go through this. And then the trucking recession they're in a particularly in a long, bad one. So, but that doesn't surprise me in a sense, because this is what was expected. And most people who look at this stuff and study it can say, yeah, this was bound to happen based on the absolute crazy peakiness of the COVID markets. But I think what's been interesting to me is I haven't been through this as a tech founder. So, we started building Rose Rocket in 2015. Again, had a tech company a little bit before that. So let's go back to like 2013.
Yeah.
It's been nothing but a bull market in this space. Nothing.
Right.
Like we've seen nothing but cheap. I don't want to say easy money, because that would not do us a disservice.
Yeah.
And it would also not be fair to a lot of people out there who have not been able to raise money, because it's always hard to raise money.
It's not easy, but there were a higher abundance
Oh
of
my
it.
God. I mean, there was more money than good startups, right? And so if you were kind of making certain metrics, you were going to get money.
Sure.
And we were one of those companies that did that. And I would say that going through a downturn in tech for the first time has been a very humbling experience, but also very fast maturation process. Like I feel like you learn from these times. These are experiences you learn from.
Yeah.
We weren't learning much from this like growth at all costs, man. It was it was kind of easy. It was like spend as much as you can, and when you run out of money, just go get more. Like that was kind of the mentality. Like make sure you hit your numbers, and you can kind of you can this is SaaS. You can make numbers up.
Yeah.
So you kind of get to where you need to go. I mean, relatively speaking, anybody who's been in SaaS knows that that you can
Mathematics.
Mathematics, fun with numbers, right? So. But if you get to when you get to a place like this where things are tighter,
yes,
it forces you as a business to actually be a lot more thoughtful.
Yeah.
And a lot more, and I think the benefit to these things is I think that the TMS is dead, which is really the manifestation for us as the platform, is born from that necessity of value creation. So I look at this as actually one of the greatest things that's ever happened to us as a business. It made us have to be really critical and thoughtful. And I don't want to suggest that we weren't before.
No, and I was going to say that because I've worked for other tech companies, and we have been extremely thoughtful about our growth and how we grew for a very, very long time.
For sure.
And so when the tech downturn happened, it didn't really affect us the same way because we weren't growth at all costs.
So true. And I think that and I would 100% agree with that. And I've always been very proud of our operational muscle that Justin and Mike and Jamie, that they've just done an amazing job at just, they're world-class operators.
But I think you're absolutely right. And it's like the forcing function of what it means to deliver our customers value, time to value immediately.
Yeah. Exactly.
That is more true than ever before.
And maybe that's interesting because maybe it's a kind of a collision between the scarcity, we'll call it, sort of that kind of came over, that blanketed the tech industry, mixed with a very challenged trucking market, which is our customer base. So those two kind of colliding. So this need for value creation kind of was really kind of coming from both sides. And again, I look at that and say, we're just, and to your point, we didn't have to do layoffs. We didn't have to do we have weathered the storm and are continuing to weather the storm really, really nicely. But it's been, I think, a great blessing for us to force us to be even that much more precise and more prescriptive about what we're doing, and take some. When you're growing really fast, you almost don't. It's odd. You would almost think it's almost a little bit counterintuitive, but you would think that when you're growing fast, it's like things are going really well. You're making lots of money. You're raising lots of money, so you can take lots of chances. But the truth is, you're in this momentum, you're kind of in a vortex, and you don't really get a chance to get out of it. But when things start to kind of slow down, so whether it's capital coming in, whether it's growth from a customer level, you have a chance to think. You have a chance to take a moment and survey the landscape and say, where are we?
Yep.
And I think we did that. And we said, we're going to make some changes. And we're going to do some really big, daring, scary things. And shift the business on its head to create this TMS is dead narrative, but have a product that actually supports that narrative. I think we're going to look back at this as one of the sort of the watershed moments in our company's history. I think when we kind of, as we work our way through this, and we're right doing that now. The wave is beautifully cresting, and I'm feeling incredibly confident about where we sit today. But it's been a really tricky and hard time, kind of getting between the last call a year. But it's also I don't know if this market didn't exist, that we would have had the the headspace to really take this on. So I don't know I don't even remember what the original question was, but I'm actually quite grateful for the environment we found ourselves in. And I'm grateful to your point of the discipline we had leading into this that gave us the runway, the people, the infrastructure to be able to make a daring move like this and feel confident that we could actually, make it happen.
Yeah. Well, I mean, to answer your question, the original question was, what else did you learn? And
Oh, was it?
yeah, and you had talked about technology as a market and what like tech's first economic downturn feels like in a while, right? And so lots of learning for us. It feels scary. Lots of learning. We're grateful for the learning, and hindsight's 40/40.
Yeah.
So
Is that the same?
huh?
Is that the same?
It's 2020,
Oh.
but I mean, let's double it
Okay,
because
got
we're in tech.
Okay, exponential growth.
Exponential growth.
Yeah.
And you're absolutely right. We made some daring moves, and seeing that starting to pay off in the conversations we're having with the market, and the fact that like people want what do you call it, sustainable growth and change, right? They want to see value and then do that step change instead of everything all at once. And I think to me that ties back to both like what's happening in freight is and its over rotation on tech, and what's happening in the tech venture market, where everything, there was a huge injection, and the ones that are going to make it are the ones that have built a strong foundation, understand how the market needs to move, and especially our market, right? It's like we have a beautiful dichotomy of being in tech and in freight, two of the extremely different industries that happen to meet in the middle, right? And we can't control how our market wants to behave. We can certainly influence, but I mean, I'm proud of our last year.
Something I'm also proud of is something I advocate for. There's a lot of things when I talk to a lot of and I do mean a lot. Like I think that's a statement people say, but I quite literally mean a lot of early founders who reach out to me looking for support, guidance, mentorship, feedback, things like that. And I love doing it, so I ask for it. And I get a lot of questions around just like, I don't know what the question would be, but my answer to whatever the question might be would, as long as you're creating, you're never competing. And I think that sort of to that notion of creation and looking at it through your own lens. And I don't mean that to be contrarian. I mean that in a sense of like having your own path, having your own thesis, learning your own lessons and applying those. And I think one thing that's really going to show up in this next wave of, because we're not done yet. Like the money, the capital on the outside markets is still being held very, very tightly. Like the markets are not open for business in terms of like venture capital. And these are still, it's a very slow market still. And I think it's going to persist for quite a while. And so I think that will inevitably, for lack of a better term, choke some companies out. They're going to run out of money. And I think the companies that are really going to come through this were the ones that went in as creators, not copiers. You know who you are when you're listening to this, because I bet you're listening to this right now. And I bet your pants are down listening to this right now.
Oh my God.
So like, you can't do that. Like you cannot win through those markets when everybody's getting, rich all at the same time. You can, there's lots of room for impersonations and fake product purses. But if you're not creating, you're always a step behind. You're dead.
And for our listeners who are not in tech and maybe in freight, trucking, logistics, I see that pattern like amongst entrepreneurship, right? When you're creating, you're not competing, and it's because so much of like, I think you had an episode of whether or not freight is a commodity, right? And like what is customer service in the first place, and how do companies compete when they're offering what is a similar service? And that's exactly it. It's like we see entrepreneurs pop up in freight all the time in trucking, and like they offer something different, and it's not a copycat of like the ones that succeed anyways. It's not a, let me take the playbook that's worked. It's like I have a philosophy on how the world can be different, and I'm going to create the space and company to do that.
Yeah.
And those who want to succeed, you have
Yeah.
to have a philosophy.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. And exactly. And I think like it's okay to, this is like more just philosophical and business now. And I think it's okay to run, like my life design is largely based on a lot of playbooks. There are things that you kind of can do, like success has a playbook, and I believe anyway, and I try to run this playbook the best of my ability. I think there are certain playbooks, like there are certain ways that are effective for selling and these types of things. But I think there is a line between the playbooks and the art and the value creation that you're bringing. And riding others' coattails, you're always eating the table scraps. You know, you just will always be in the table scraps because you're 1, 2, 3 steps behind. And then companies like us, we get wise to it, and we're going to fake you out. Like we're gonna throw audibles, and so you're gonna be chasing one thing that you think we're doing, and it's just for fun.
The thing about playbooks is you got to know the game enough to know whether or not you're using the right playbook.
Exactly. So
you can have the best playbook in the world. You're playing a different sport altogether.
So when you're tailing someone, just be careful that they haven't spotted you, because they may lead you down a dark alley just for a laugh.
Just for a laugh.
Anyway,
what about in your personal growth? What in the last year jumped out on you in terms of something you're proud of or something you've witnessed?
This is sort of this is a bigger one, I guess. So this year for me, so we talked last year on the show, and I was pretty open about having borderline personality disorder and kind of what that meant for, and I don't know how much I got into it with what it meant for my life, but it can be fairly destructive. And so I have taken, a very serious, really a necessity, approach to doing things to mitigate how it can affect my life. So everything from I did group therapy for like dialectical behavior. It was like once a week for 6 months. It was transformative. It was amazing. I've been in therapy for 5 years with BPD specific counselors. Again, incredible. Have to have it, building those tools. But as I kind of started hitting what I would consider, I don't want to say a wall, that's unfair, but I felt like progress had started to plateau a little bit.
Sure.
And I was looking kind of for the next hit, if you will, on like, how can I kind of further this? I'd read the books. I'm very obsessed with this part of, again, because it has such a detrimental effect on specifically my personal relationship, especially my relationship with my wife. I just needed to get to the next level. So I endeavored this year to do ketamine, which, for those who have heard about this, I'll talk about it a little bit. Like, this isn't like I bought ketamine off the street and like went home and like did rails of ketamine. This is going to like a clinic, which is designed to treat depression, post-traumatic stress disorder, anxiety. And actually, so I was the first borderline personality patient they'd ever taken. And after my treatment, which was successful, I'll talk a little bit about it, they now have that on their website as something they will treat. And I think it's the only clinic I know in the Toronto area that treats for that. So the impact has been remarkable, to say the least. I can't even begin to explain, although I'm going to try a little bit, how impactful it was. So you go into you go to the clinics, and they're I think in the States they're actually far more legal and accessible, I think, in most states than they are even here. Here it's an anesthesiologist that has to be on site. It's very like professional. It's quite, I was kind of expecting a much more holistic experience. I thought there'd be kind of like wind chimes in the background. It would smell like frankincense and those kinds of things, but it wasn't. It was more like walking into like a hospital setting in a way. You sit in a comfortable chair. They put you in an IV. They give you I think for all intents and purposes, a pretty copious amount of ketamine. And you go under for about an hour and a half. And you're, it's something they use ketamine is an incredibly safe drug. It's used as anesthetic for children. It's because it doesn't have a negative respiratory effect like some traditional anesthetics. And so you kind of go into this almost, I'd say not mild sedative state, heavily sedative state, but not as much as it would be if you were getting your gallbladder removed, for instance. And you basically you listen to music, and you have a psychedelic-ish experience for a period of time, and you come to, and you take an Uber home because your legs are wobbly, and within a couple hours you're kind of back to normal again. And so you do that 6 times. This is generally the protocol for most people. You do it 6 times over 3 weeks. And I have to say, when like coming out of that, your first third or fourth session, you start kind of feeling the difference. But the thing that has been the most profound impact for me in this is that Stephen Covey says this the best of anyone I've ever heard it in 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. He talks about the gap between stimulus and response. So somebody pushes you and immediately you push back, you run.
Yep.
That pause, that gap between getting pushed and making the decision or taking the action on what you're going to do is that gap between stimulus and response. And so I feel an emotion. It's coming fast. I'm going to react to that emotion. And now it is, I feel an emotion. I can recognize that emotion. I can name that emotion. I can kind of laugh at that emotion or not. I can observe it. And I can decide to act on it. And if I'm going to act on it, how am I going to act on it? What would be productive versus destructive, which before it was destroy first. Oh shit, pick up the pieces. And so, and the thing with ketamine, it's unlike something like, say, psilocybin, which kind of gives you, and I think psilocybin does this as well. I just don't know as much about it, but it gives you a lot of, when you come down from a really good like mushroom trip, you're like, oh wow, I had this really profound like thought, this ideas, and I realized some things about myself. And those things can stick with you for a lifetime if you kind of have the right setting, the right situation. But what ketamine's actually doing is moving the neuroplasticity in your brain is actually moving. Your new neural pathways are being formed. And so it is more like a surgical, it's like surgery on your brain. It's moving things around. You think about things differently. You view things differently. You feel things differently. It is so difficult to properly put into words how profound of an impact it's been.
Wow.
Outside of giving examples of just how peaceful life has been for me since I did that. So it's like, it's not for everyone, but shit, it almost should be, in that like the efficacy they're having with this for depression is something like north of 70%. Like it's unbelievable. Like I think Prozac is somewhere around like 40%. And I think that's the most effective. It's remarkable. It's getting moved through sort of the class drug system really, really, really rapidly because of just how effective it is for people with PTSD and depression. And like it is, it's not hyperbolic for me to say it was life-changing. And so that was probably the most like, I had a really good year this year, just like on a personal level specifically, especially I should say. And that was probably single-handedly the most important thing I did this year. That is one of the most important things I've ever done in my life. So that happened to me.
So thank you for sharing.
Happily.
At the, we talked about this before coming on air, whether or not you're going to share your ketamine story.
Yeah.
And of course, I would not be doing my job if I didn't let the audience know that these are not health advice. This is Justin sharing his personal
We're not doctors.
journey.
Yeah.
We are not doctors.
Yeah, thank you
do
for
your
that.
own research.
Yeah.
But what I do really want to celebrate and draw attention to is you touched on your mental health journey this time last year in terms of our podcast. And I love that you were vulnerable enough to share it. I also love that you are, as by definition, someone who, like, without knowing you, would have not thought of the things that you went through, right? And so destigmatizing, like, the things that people go through in order to, like, regardless of their achievements, right? It's like we're talking about you're an exceptionally high achiever that suffers through borderline personality disorder, and you have a continuous commitment to improve yourself for the betterment of the people around you. And that is like, want to take a moment to celebrate that because it's a hard thing, right?
Thanks, Win. I mean, yeah, it's funny. It's like, I feel like it is, I've always sort of thought of myself as someone who has to, like, I want to do these things for other people. As I've kind of been going through this year and doing a lot of reflecting and thinking about, I think we often will come back to points in our life, sort of life purpose conversations and sort of in values. And are my values the same as they were last year? And something I've really, like, and I think sometimes with me, and I've still got this like teenage desire to be original. Like, like I like a song, so someone else likes it, I hate it. Like, I still go through these things. Like, I'm 43 years old. I'm still going through these things, right? But like, in this quest to be original, I think I've been trying to find kind of like a punchline for my life's purpose that just sounds unique. But as I kind of like absolve myself from having to be like a special snowflake on everything, I think what I've really discovered this year, and I don't know if life purposes are dynamic or you're born with it. I don't pretend to know, because I'm not sure that I've ever really thought about it as much as I have this year. But I just really feel like deep down, and I know this from like when I just do work, when I like anybody who's worked with me and anybody who's listening to this podcast who's bought from me, they will know this. Like my absolute, at this point in my life, and for as long as I can remember, life purpose is to help. Like if I see somebody broken down the side of the road, I'm pulling over. If I see someone who is old and shoveling their driveway, I'm shoveling their driveway. If I'm trying to help somebody buy software, I'm not selling them what I've got for sale. I'm trying to sell them what they need or what they want.
Right.
If I'm trying to set an example for my kids, or if I'm like, partially the reason I did, so I'll just like a little side secret, and like this, I hope the ketamine clinic's not listening to this. I'm sure they're not, but like I actually faked PTSD to get into ketamine because they wouldn't let me in. Because I knew, like in my heart of hearts, knowing what I was going through and doing all the research I did, I'm like, this shit's gonna help. But borderline had not been accepted as a condition that they could treat.
Right.
So I kind of like spun up a PTSD diagnosis through answering questions I knew they would want to hear to get in to do it. And then said, hey, guess what? And they're like, oh, cool, it worked. Okay, so now we can put it out there. Because I felt like I want to be a pioneer for people who have this, because I know this will work. And I'm kind of like, and I started building this like program. And I remember even being like under the influence of ketamine, and because it's weird when you're on ketamine, you're like seeing and all these like crazy colors and hearing all these things, but you also have this like executive function in your brain where you're thinking about things clearly. So I'm building like a business plan over at the same time while I'm like tripping balls on ketamine, right? So I'm like thinking about like, okay, like if you get people into like group therapy and then you put like ketamine with it, you could probably like, but that's very expensive. How could you package that? Like I was trying to think of how to get people with BPD who are like lost, like from where they are to where they want to get to, because I know it's possible.
And I see so much because of your deep desire to share this, right?
Yeah.
It's like, again, as we're on a podcast called Freight Famous. Everyone,
Right.
you know, as a reminder,
Right,
we have
right.
no obligation to talk about this topic whatsoever.
And whenever
And
people are still listening, especially it's you and I now anyway.
just you and me. But the reason why you were so excited to share and felt the need to share is that, and we know this,
Yeah.
even if you don't suffer from borderline personality disorder, right? Like the mental health journey is very important.
Yeah.
Like if you're going through something, find you're not alone.
Yeah.
Never alone.
Yeah.
Someone's going through something very similar.
Yeah.
And then if your experience with ketamine, it's like finding an answer to something that you've been struggling with for a very long time.
Yeah, and I think if it wasn't for others, I don't know that I'd be as motivated to do it. And I don't mean
Right.
like I don't want Jackie to hear that and be like, "Oh my God, like you didn't do it for me." Of course I did. But like the real driver of trying to package it and figure it out and build a unit economic structure that would work for people. Even I reached out to the clinic. It was like, how can we support more people? Like this stuff can get really, like we talked about this in the last show. Like mental health, one of the challenges with mental health getting better is it can be really expensive.
Yes.
And so like even this program, this stuff is super costly. And it's like I don't want getting cured from mental health to be an elitist thing.
Yeah.
Like it's like that is it sickens me, you know. And so like I'm trying to figure out how to break that down. So anyway, that's a bigger thing. But I do want to say something I think that it sort of parlayed into this, and I haven't shared this with others, so I'm in a sharing mood, so I'm going to do this. So in 2011, I went for an eye appointment, and I got a letter from the government in the mail saying you've lost your license because you're blind.
Oh my gosh.
I was like, yeah. I was like, I'm fucking blind. You're fucking blind. So I get this thing. So then I go back to the doctor. Like, you have this thing called retinitis pigmentosa. You are going blind, and your vision is so low that you can't drive a car. This is in 2011. You've driven with me, by the way, since. So this has an interesting
Excellent.
ending.
That's good to know.
So it turned out that I have like no peripheral vision.
Right.
I have like 30-degree peripheral vision, right? Basically, I just like see like if you put like what's it called, like toilet paper tubes up to your eyes. That's basically what I see. But I didn't know that until they told me, because how do I know what other people see? That's just what the world looks like.
Yeah.
And so
I see where you're going with this.
Yeah, right. So I was like, so I remember going to the ophthalmologist. Like he's like, people with your visual acuity typically use walking aids, like a
Right.
cane.
Right.
And I was like, holy shit. Like I drove down to see him, right? And so I think the point of all this is even that at that point, even then, like that was kind of the first thing I sort of dealt with from a health perspective. That was before I'd been diagnosed with BPD. I certainly had it, but didn't know. Even at that point, my whole mission so early in that was like, you're telling me that people have a cane,
Mm-hmm.
and I drove down here to see you and lead a very normal, if not
Right.
successful life. It shouldn't be that way.
Mm-hmm.
And so I went on a mission, even that, to start like, trying to get, trying to raise that and talk to people and reach out to people and talk to Canada Fights Blindness people and say like, it doesn't have to be, those are hard conversations to have with people. But like, your life isn't over if this happens.
Right.
And I don't know why I decided to share that, but it is just kind of just,
It's a nice analogy into
Yeah.
describing. It's like the more that we share, the more people actually learn and get educated about what the options are, or like whether or not what you're going through is normal or there's something to work on.
Yeah, I think maybe also it's like we all go through shit.
Yeah.
Like we all, it's like life can be super challenging, and and it's
Can be.
It's all perspective, like
No,
like,
it is.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
not
yeah,
can be.
yeah.
That's not an option. It only, gets harder.
My daughter Storm today, she's in grade 9 and she did her first exam, and she was very, very concerned about her exams, and she had really good marks going in. I'm super proud of her. It's grade 9, and she did her geography exam and she totally bombed her geography exam, and she bawled her eyes out, and was so upset with herself. And we had this really beautiful moment in conversation about, efforts versus outcomes. And, we don't always get to choose the outcome. And sometimes we can put very little effort in and get extraordinary outcomes. And sometimes we can put all the effort in the world and get really shitty outcomes.
Yeah.
And so we have to really celebrate our efforts, and I think that's, we control so little, like, and so I think if we can just, focus on, I don't know, I'm, getting philosophical here, but like, just, I think it's an effort thing oftentimes. And can we feel good about it? That's where the win lies, right? In the effort.
I love that. On that note, do you want to end our episode here?
Yeah.
And let's
I
celebrate
mean, no,
effort?
but yeah.
I know. We can take this on forever.
Yeah, exactly.
But I do love ending the note on celebrating our efforts.
Yeah.
Because you can control outcome as much as you want to, but most of the time you can't.
Yeah.
So we have to celebrate our efforts.
Can I actually end this on one note? It's not about drugs or anything like that. It's just a very simple, it's actually a business thing. And it might even pertain to freight somehow.
I would love it if we ended the episode on something business and freight related on a podcast called Freight Famous.
So I think I figured out business this year in like a sentence.
Okay.
Like, it's actually super, 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 super easy. Like,
Edge of my seat.
you ready?
Ready.
Those who create the most value win. Period. So when you are having a business, starting a business, running a business, working in the business, you will always win every single time if you are creating extraordinary value. Every single time. Find me a business that works that doesn't create extraordinary value, you will not. Find me a business that fails, it will almost always be because they did not create extraordinary value. Now, that could be for the market, that could be for their employees, but somewhere along the line, they failed at creating, or at least making a concerted, truthful effort at creating extraordinary value. Businesses that fail don't create value. Businesses that win do. Like, period.
Love it.
Period.
There you have it, folks.
That's it.
Thank you for tuning in.
Thank you. And like and subscribe if you like. You can't unlike these shows. So thank you for being with us today on another episode of Freight Famous.